Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
And I'm Eliot.
I got to say, I am absolutely loving these interview stories that we're getting. I'm so glad we did this. They're really, really funny. And we want more of them because the intent is, one more go around here of collecting stories. And then I think probably the next episode, we're going to add the segment where we read some of the second segment within the episode called So Here's Your Story. And this first time we'll be featuring stories that people have sent in of my awkward interview. And some of them are of when you're the interviewee. Some of them have been when you are the interviewer. And I promise you they're really good.
And a couple of them are even, this didn't happen to me, but a friend once.
A friend of a friend. So you can also submit them that way. And we will use them anonymously. We'd love to use your name if you're cool with that, but it doesn't have to happen. But so just a quick note on how you can get those to us if you want to possibly be included in our next news segment rollout next time. On Facebook or Twitter, you can use the hashtag #myawkwardinterview. You can email them to us at talktous@sohere'smystory.com. The other really easy thing you can do is record a voice memo on your phone or whatever and just email that to us if you don't want to have to write it all out. That's possibly even easier. And I just thought of that the other day.
Yeah, and it gives us the option of just hitting play and letting you tell your story. If
you want. And if you don't want that, you can just say that in the email. But so please, please, please send those in. I know there are a million of them out there. So think about it.
Okay. And
it'll make me very happy. And I know that matters.
It matters a lot to me. I know that.
Okay.
So with that, I just want to make sure that we thank our patrons. And if you, by the way, would like to be one of their number, just go to patreon.com and look up So Here's My Story. And you can see all the cool perks, which I know we're now revamping. So there's going to be
more on that in a minute.
But our patrons for whom we are extremely grateful, Tom Loveland at Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, Herbert and Ethel Inc., Marycraft Staffing and HR Solutions, and
our newest patron, Beth Lawrence, who is one of the founders of Communication Aptitude. They have an app called Infocabulary.
Yeah, you were telling me about this.
Oh my God, it's so fascinating. And they're just up to some really cool stuff in the world. Some of the research that they're doing, learning vocabulary through inference, like you infer visually, like analogous visual associations to actually learn vocabulary in a way that's really actually a whole new way to learn vocabulary. And as the mother of two dyslexic children, as the spouse of a dyslexic person, and as a dyslexic person myself, I'm really excited about the work they're doing because it's kind of going in a different door to the brain for learning vocabulary, which was always such a bear for me.
No, I've been reading a lot on artificial intelligence and how, you might have Alexa and Siri be able to repeat things back to you, but to get these apps to actually learn and to get the way people start to absorb knowledge, and they're trying to translate that to apps, is just amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really cool stuff there. So thank you, Beth, for your support. We look forward to having you in the patron circle with us. Before we move on to the story, and I promise we'll do that next, about the patron levels, because you and I have been going back and forth about what would make these more fun, what would make them juicy. We're paying attention to some of the things people have mentioned that they would like. Yeah. And it just occurred to me this morning that we could actually just ask you, the people who are actually
yes, we could,
instead of trying to figure it out ourselves. So a couple of the things that people have suggested. So we'd love to hear if either of these are interesting to you. And then if you have other ideas, please submit them in any of the ways that we've mentioned. One is a private Facebook group where we could be having some of these discussions in a smaller, more private community, asking questions, getting some guidance on things, bouncing ideas off each other. Another one is almost like private call-in office hours, kind of.
Yeah, we had talked about that, which I think would be, we'd have to figure out how to make that workable, but it could be a really cool idea.
Yeah, it might be just phone, might be like a Zoom or Skype or something. Yeah. But we're open to playing around with whatever would make this more useful to you. All the same emails that we mentioned before can get us. You can, what I did not mention before is you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook at SHMS Podcast. That's the easiest way to find us on those. So excellent. Are we ready to move on to our story?
We are, and you have one.
I do. I was afraid you were going to say you had one because I'm claiming this one.
No, it's all
my
yours.
story. here we go. So this story needs a little bit of backstory for anyone who hasn't known me my 44 years. So I am, a little bit of personal information. I am someone for whom my weight has gone up and down a lot in my life. So I'm 5'3", which isn't terribly tall. I'm actually 5'3" and a half. Let the record stand. 5'3" and a half. And there have been more than a few times in my life where my weight has been up closer to like 190, and not just when I was pregnant. So I'm significantly lower than that now. In fact, I did this strong woman competition on Sunday, for which I committed to getting into the lightweight class, which was under 140. So I am actually probably my lightest I've ever been in my adult life now, but I have been 50, even 60 pounds heavier than I am right now. That's important to note because when I have been at the middle range or at different points in my life, I had this friend who used to go shopping with me, and she would laugh when we would go shopping for clothes because, and this was right after I'd lost a bunch of that weight, where she would say, Jodi, you still shop like a fat girl.
Something a guy would never, say.
Because my visual and my personal image of like what clothes to pick, I was picking things that I would have picked that I would have worn when I was heavier. And so the point being that it was an incorrect perception of myself. And I've known that's always been the case, and I thought I've adjusted on that. But now the reason I wanted to tell this story and laugh a little bit at myself is that apparently that sort of false sense of, in that case, lack of confidence, shows up in the other direction as well. Because like I said, this is probably the best shape I've ever been in my life. And apparently your perception of confidence can kind of swing the other way, because I went shopping a couple weeks ago because I do need new clothes. A lot of the stuff I have doesn't fit. And I go into the dressing room. And I started to say I wish I had a video, but no, I don't wish I had a video.
No, that's not good.
No, inappropriate. And apparently I was imagining that I'm like 6 feet tall and super rail thin, because everything I took into the dressing room was like not made for me in the other direction. So whereas I used to take stuff into the dressing room that was like big and baggy and, would like try and cover things up, now apparently I think I'm much taller and thinner than I actually am. So I bring this up because it sort of piles on something else that I thought was incredibly useful, was this article. Do you know Kumail Nanjiani?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay, so he's the actor in, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the show. Oh shoot, what's the tech startup show? Help me.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, he's brilliant. So he's the guy who wrote The Big Sick about his wife. So it's that guy.
So by the way,
you don't know him,
our incredible team member Kristi is going to put this in the show notes.
Yes, Kristi will make sure that everything that I can't remember is in the show notes. She's like my assistant's assistant. I started to say my assistant's dog. That sounds terrible. I'm not bad.
You started to say what?
The service dogs that like make.
Really? So
from my memory,
once this episode goes to Kristi, we'll probably be looking for a new team member.
Possibly. She makes sure that all the things I can't remember show up in the show notes. So, anyway,
as we know, it takes a village to make this podcast. But
yes, it takes a village to get Jodi through the day. So Kumail Nanjiani, who I think is a brilliant comedian and a really cool guy, wrote this article that actually my husband sent me that he saw on LinkedIn because he knows we love him. And he goes through this whole series of, as he was coming up being a comedian, about how he didn't know what he was doing. And then someone told him, fake it till you make it, which more on that in a second, because I don't love fake it till you make it, but that's sort of splitting hairs at the moment. And how at this one point, he just started pretending that he just started saying yes, pretending that he knew what he was doing. And, then he'd get asked to act in something and he never acted, but he said yes. And he was like, I can pretend to know how to act.
Right.
And the story goes on and on. It repeats a bunch of circumstances, but I do want to read this one bit that I just loved. He said he'd never been the main guy in a movie before. Could I handle it? Maybe, maybe not. But I knew I could pretend to handle it. And this brings me to my final point. And this is where I wanted to sort of bounce off of here.
Okay.
I've learned that there is no difference between being confident and pretending to be confident. Nobody else can tell the difference. Even your own body can't tell the difference. Through the exercise of fake it till you make it, I was learning to trust myself. I was learning to trust my decisions and my thoughts and my abilities, because all the famous comedians that were so confident in that New York show, they didn't know what they were doing either. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Some of us are just better at pretending like they do.
And I think that is incredibly well said. And very, very accurate. It's something that I think translates into all facets of not only business life, but life in general.
Well, what the reason I wanted to bring this up is both my experience and then that sort of more profound way of stating it. To me, we talk so much about being confident as if it's this like program that gets installed in your operating system that you then walk around with and you have. It's like a thing you do or be. And I actually walked away from these several experiences that I just went through thinking it's actually kind of bogus. The whole thing is bogus. I mean, I was underconfident and then suddenly I was overconfident.
And you were the same person.
The exact same person. And it certainly translates to different situations. And so just really questioning the entire concept of confidence and does it even really exist? And is it really nothing more than just kind of moving forward and not questioning it and sort of, because I've had clients say, if I could just be more confident, as if it's something they could get and then have. And I don't think it works that way.
I don't think it works that way. I think part of it is developing a working relationship with your insecurities, because.
What do you mean?
What I mean by that is you can let your fear either paralyze you or at least compel a decision. I can't do that. I can't be the main actor because I've never done that. And that's really your fear. Well, if I've never done that, then I can't do that. But if you develop kind of a working relationship, meaning not banish them entirely, recognize the validity.
Which is a joke.
Which is a joke. You can't do that. So you can recognize the validity of the insecurities, of the fear. You can develop a working relationship, meaning you can use it. You can say, well, you know what? If I accept this, I know that I haven't been the main guy. So I'm going to have to examine what am I most afraid of and really work to overcome, what I think could happen or the bad things that I think could happen. So you have to make peace with it.
See, I think that still sounds terrifying when you put it that way.
I don't. I think that I've always found that if I'm really worried about something, the worst advice I could get is don't worry, because I will. I'm really worried about it.
Yeah, so calm down, and or
don't cry.
Has never helped anybody.
It doesn't
in the
help anybody. So I think, okay, well, I have to, in my own head, I call it, I have to walk through it. I have to walk through that fear. What's that fear look like? What is the worst thing that could happen? How does that scenario that really causes my gut to clench, how does that play out? And then I can either explore the fact that I'm not really worried about something realistic, or I'm worried about something that could happen, but now that I have a handle on exactly what the facts are, I can take concrete steps in order to avoid it.
That's fascinating.
So that's a working relationship with your insecurities. That's what I call it.
That's so interesting. No, it makes perfect sense to me intellectually. I go about it from kind of almost the opposite. I think if I work out, my imagination is far too rich to, if I start imagining all the worst things that can happen, I could make a whole day of that. If I let myself do that. And I think I would actually then become actually quite anxious and nervous. I have what's almost like a dysfunction of, I just don't think about any of the bad things that might happen. I just sort of blindly step forward and figure it out as I go.
Yeah. And I think that's, look, my dad used to have all these stresses. He was a lawyer, a sole practitioner, and he would be stressed about this or the other. And he was very, very good at compartmentalizing. And he used to tell me when he walked over the threshold into our house, he didn't worry about anything. He didn't think about any of the work. He can literally just leave it on the doorstep. And I couldn't do that. For me, I have to really process what is it that's worrying me? What do I think in a realistic sense? What do I think could actually happen if we go through this chain of events? And then how can I control the outcome so that it doesn't? And I feel much better when I've addressed it as opposed to minimized it or shut it off.
Well, I think what's tricky about that for me is that if you're imagining, that's great if what you're imagining as the worst case scenario is something that you can control. And I think I often just imagine that there's so much we can't control. I try to mitigate and channel how much, channel's not the right word. I try and filter how much energy I give all the possible things that might happen. I certainly think what are the possible obstacles here? Where could we fall in a pit on something here? It's not like I don't ever think into the future, but I also know that every time you take it's like moving a piece on the chessboard, then the whole game changes. And so I try not to, what I don't do is try to worry too many steps ahead, because then, you're just wasting energy on things that may never actually get there. But I get it.
But one of the keys that you said, just going back to the story and to the quote, is whether confidence is real or some sort of ephemeral phenomenon. And I think that one of the things that I was once told by Michael Port, as a matter of fact, he said that his best advice is to act as if.
Were you looking over at my page? You're copying off my notes here. I just wrote the words "act as if" with a little asterisk beside it.
Well, you have drawings in a box around it.
I feel like you're trying to scoop
No, see,
my
I have
story.
it. I'll show you my page. It's right
there.
there.
All right. Go ahead. Yeah. Proceed.
So you act,
and then I'm going to chime in like it was my story, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to take a pause for a minute, and then you can say, here's a thought.
I have an idea.
But I found that to be really helpful, to act as if you are this person in demand. Act as if you've done this before. Act as if you're an expert in this field. And by that, I don't mean, well, sure, I can do the neurosurgery. There are certain fields that you can't really act as if you've actually got to.
Please don't.
But for mentally, to get yourself in that place of confidence, you act as if, and that's the same biochemically as it is mentally, the same as confidence.
Yeah, perfect. So perfect. Because I like act as if more than fake it till you make it, because there's something about fake it till you make it that still feels saccharine. It still feels like you're like, I'm pretending to be something. And that, at least for me, that doesn't make me feel better. Feeling like a fake or a sham doesn't exactly bolster my swagger,
Right. Well, and you also don't want to get up in front of an audience, like in my world when you do speaking. You don't want to get up in front of an audience and say, now I'm faking it.
Yeah. So for me, the act as if is much more powerful, and I can actually break it down a few steps from there to a little bit of kind of like neuroscience, how the brain works, is, there is this immutable connection between belief, behaviors, and results. So take something really simple, like if I believe that everybody hates to get cold calls, then when I am cold calling, if I ever had to do that, if I was cold calling somebody, then I am more likely to, call during their lunch period, or like call after hours. Or if I do call and get them or leave a message, I'm going to say, hey, sorry to bother you. I know everyone hates these phone calls. It's, blah, blah, blah. Result being, nobody wants to talk to me. They don't return my calls. They say no, they hang up on you, whatever. This is the important part. That result 100% of the time always reinforces that initial belief. Mm-hmm. And I think, well, that makes sense. And that's a cool thing to know. The trap can be imagining, at least I think, that you can change that belief. Like, okay, well, I'm just going to believe. And that's what feels like faking it to me. I'm going to believe that people love cold calls. And I'm going to act as, do the behavior. That to me just falls flat because I don't really believe that. But the act as if I can say, okay, what behaviors would somebody have who actually thinks this is a great idea or this is really good? I would call, I would speak to them with that, they should be excited to hear about this thing. I would call when I knew I could catch them. And if you do those behaviors and get the results, it automatically starts to kind of create the seedlings of that belief you need for them to that be a thing. And that's where I think it kind of, the actions can create the confidence, because you get feedback from the world that thing is a good thing and that you're good at that thing. Right.
But I think I draw a little bit of a distinction, because in your example with cold calling, I think the act as if has to be to you. It has to be first person. So I wouldn't act as if people loved cold calls. I would act as if I loved making them.
Great.
And so my behaviors, what does a person who loves making cold calls do?
I'm sorry, do those people exist?
I think I
just want to the example is starting to get confusing for me now.
Instead of hanging up on them, next time I'm going to actually have to engage them.
This is my hobby.
But what do they do? They love talking to people. They're enthusiastic. They have a smile that you can hear in their voice. They're excited, whatever it is. So, because if you act as if you are who you are, I hate cold calls, you're not, it's going to be a spiral of shame. It's just not going to work. So you act as if somebody who likes this. And one other part on this, and it's kind of a shift in thinking. I'm not sure. I think it's related, so you'll tell me if it's not. But again, I was, this is a Michael Port heavy conversation.
Is Michael Port paying you for this? Is he sponsored today?
So
this episode brought to you by Michael Port.
He was telling me that he had a situation where somebody was saying, can you do this next week? And he goes, no, because I have to prepare for X, whatever he had to prepare. And he said a switch went off in his mind because that was so negative. He needed to change the I have to I get to, because it was actually something he was really looking forward to. And he stopped saying, I have to prepare for this. And he's like, I get to do this. I get to prepare for that. And it switched the mindset from something that's just an albatross around his neck. Geez, next week I can't because I have to do this, to realizing that the thing he had next week was something he really wanted to do. And if he started even internalizing the joy at getting to do that, the anticipation, then his behaviors changed.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's related in terms of mindset shift. I don't know that it's related in terms of like, is confidence actually a really clear thing?
Just the mindset shift.
Yeah. So I want to come back to that, because the reason this feels important to me, I mean, while I could talk forever about all kinds of mindset shift stuff, the thing about confidence that I feel like is so important is I do feel like it's this barrier. It's this thing that people think they like born without that chip or something, like, oh, if only I could be confident. So to me, it feels like a real opportunity for some like hack tricks. I mean, I would love so studio audience. It wouldn't be fun if we had a studio audience, live studio audience. Okay, tangent. Hey, I would love to hear your hacks on whether it's, you can get us on Twitter, post it on the Facebook page, shoot us an email, whatever. What are your hacks for confidence, for getting over, I don't even know how I want to say it, for whether it's act as if, or tell us a story about a time where you just like stumbled into, actually, so here, I'll tell you my very first memory of this kind of phenomenon was I was in 3rd grade. And Miss Johnson was my teacher, I believe. And she said, does anybody know how to use the mimeograph machine? And I raised my hand, and she handed me the mimeograph and sent me to the teacher's lounge to make 10 more copies. And as I walked into the teacher's lounge, like I literally have this memory of kind of coming to, like I kind of moment. Like, I don't even know which machine is the mimeograph machine, not to mention how to use the thing. And, end of story. Like, I figured it out and I got it back there. But I think that kind of, for me, the hack is I don't think about it until I just get started. And then it's like, I push myself into the part where it's almost too embarrassing to back out. And then I have to figure it out. So that's kind of my hack. But I would love to hear any hacks you have. Although in that case, it was more just sort of like some almost like stupidity of just saying yes before you think about it.
No, I think that's a mindset. And I think it also is, the hack there is somewhere there's a core of confidence that you will be able to figure it out. No,
absolutely not. So I will utterly disagree with you on that. There is now, as a 44-year-old, through 44 years of saying yes before thinking about it, to lots of things that then I got myself into and was like, oh crap, I have no idea how to do this thing. I have built up a confidence that I can figure things out in the moment, but it certainly didn't start that way. It was more of just a like impulse control. I mean, in that moment, I just wanted to be the cool kid that got to go to the teacher's lounge. That's the only thing that was in my mind at that moment.
If I raise my hand, it's because I figure that, I'll be able to figure it out.
You do now, but when you were like 7, was that the deal?
Well, you're assuming I raised my hand when I was 7, but if I did, it would, because I knew that eventually I could figure it out. But when you talk about hacks, there's no way that we can let this conversation go by without referencing Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on power poses. And she talks a lot about fake it till you make it, which we've already discussed to some extent. But it is fascinating how she talks about her experiments with graduate students and how you put them in power poses. And those power poses are much more expansive. They could be hands on hips, like the Wonder Woman pose or whatever. But if you stay in those power poses, you could, go into a bathroom stall before an interview and do this. It sounds so crazy, but this power pose for 2 minutes, and it actually raises your cortisol levels, which reduce your stress. And it makes you more in command, and it's a hack for being able to handle stressful situations and act as if, to be able to almost use your body to almost trick your mind into a state of confidence.
No, I love that, because I mean, that is absolutely a great, like, using biology to back up your confidence. I think also hacks that, and I want to be really clear about it. What I'm not talking about, although that one's a great way of boosting your confidence so then you can go do the thing.
Yeah.
I think that where I get really interested in this topic is the things that can help you just do the thing so that you can build the confidence. I think that is at the crux of what worries me and concerns me about the whole idea of confidence, as I've thought about this, is when it is perceived as the thing you have to have before you do the thing. And I actually think that is entirely backwards. I think it's the thing you get from doing the thing and realizing that you can figure it out, or that the worst thing, things happen and you figure that next thing out.
No, I think that's definitely true, because if you want to wait until you're ready, if you want to wait until you have the requisite level of confidence, whatever that is, and if a meter exists for it, before you do whatever challenge is placed in front of you, you're not going to do it, because you're striving to become something that I don't necessarily believe exists or has to. You're striving to become confident, as opposed to just being able to place yourself in the mindset of, I can figure it out. I can act as if.
You just reminded me of something. I watched a fascinating documentary on happiness, actually. And it was I think it was called Euphoria. And it was talking about how there are all of these things that are not attainable as a direct, you cannot pursue them directly, that they are only attainable obliquely, that they are the byproduct of something else. And so, like, happiness is more of a byproduct of meaning than it is something that, if you pursue meaning, then that gives happiness. It's just one example to oversimplify. But I think confidence is not something that you can directly reach for or build. I think it's a byproduct of doing and and not doing and finding out you were great at the thing, doing also and falling down and breaking, skinning your knee and realizing that that's okay too, that you dealt with that and the next thing happened. To me, there's a real mindset shift here of from, I have to have confidence so I can go do the thing, as if then there's this big, long thing in front of you. And I think that the shift in my mind is, if you do the thing, then you're at like a next new thing. It's like breaking it down to a bunch of tiny little incremental, taking one step forward. And I think you imagine that you have to have the confidence for lots of stuff. Like, it's a great big thing you need. Whereas all you have to do is, like, it reminds me the first time I ever went on a high dive. And I went up the high dive and got up there and then decided that I really, 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 really didn't want to jump off the high dive, because I was like, in fact, I'm actually getting like slightly clammy thinking about it right now. But I turned around and, the 12 jerk kids that were on the ladder of the high dive had no interest in climbing back down the ladder and wouldn't let me off. So you kind of only have one choice at that point. There's only one way I'm getting off the high dive, and that's to jump off. And I couldn't seem to make myself jump, but then I decided that it was I couldn't make myself jump, but I could just sort of like walk off. I don't know why that seemed different, but the fact of the matter is, you kind of just have to step, and then you realize it's not, the end of the world. But so I think of that sometimes when I don't want to do something, or I'm feeling a lack of confidence or afraid it's going to mess it up. I'm like, well, I'll just take one step. And then if I want to back out, I can, but I'm just going to take one step forward. And almost every time, then I get some kind of feedback that says, like, okay, this isn't so bad. I think the place it's dangerous is when it keeps you paralyzed in one spot. And I think the key hack is just like, what's one tiny step I can move forward on this thing?
Well, right. I think that it's very rare that it's just a binary choice. I do it all or I don't do it at all. I think that you can make the choice to just take the first step, or just move a little bit in that direction and see what happens, and take it one step at a time. I do agree with that. And I also, going back to what you said with confidence being a byproduct, it's a similar thought to me about how, some people, some successful companies, I think a lot of successful companies think about money. They think if they do what they want to do exceedingly well, if they follow their passion exceedingly well, if they follow their strengths exceedingly well, then money is the byproduct. But if they start their company just to make money, then they're never going to achieve the excellence, because money itself should be a byproduct of something with meaning.
Yep. Agreed. Speaking of companies, and this is actually the thing I just wrote down here, I actually think this thing that we're talking about here, while we've spent this entire time talking about individuals, much like when we talked with Tamsin about organizational imposter syndrome, right. I think this same thing shows up in the leadership teams that I work with. It shows up in the strategic planning of the companies that I help out with. It shows up in the culture of companies, where this imagining that, your company's not to a place yet where it can do this other thing. It's like organizational confidence. It can sometimes feel like something you have to have before you do the next thing, before you go after that project or submit that RFP. And I think it's just as dangerous there. Whereas if you just, what's one little step we can move in that direction?
Yeah. And organizational confidence as we wrap up, to me, one of the signs that you really have to work on that is if your management team is stuck on limiting its possibilities to what other people in your industry do.
Yeah.
If you're looking to your right and looking to your left at your peers and you think, we can't do that because nobody else is doing that. And that's so common. I've worked with management teams, we both have, where that's a prevalent thought process. And you're right. I think that just like Tamsin was talking about imposter syndrome organizationally, and we all know it exists individually, I think this confidence phenomenon and the dual nature of confidence exists in organizations and groupthink just as much as it does individuals.
Yeah. And just in closing on that, I heard, I can't even give you a vague reference on where I heard this because I have no idea, but I'll see if I can think of it. If I can, I'll let Kristi know. And assuming that she's still working on the team.
Yes, assuming she gets over the seeing eye dog reference. She happens
to love dogs, so I think she will understand the intent with which I meant that.
I'm just glad you said it, not me.
I heard someone say that looking to outside guidance, whether it's experts or what other companies are doing, is a great place to look for what not to do, but that is absolutely not where you should ever look for what to do. That you have to find your own way, which I just think is really, so when you're comparing your company to other companies, I think it's a very dangerous if you're looking at what they are doing. It's not so bad to look for what not to do, but to have that confidence to move forward without confidence actually in the direction of what you know is right for you or what you know is right for the company.
Right. And that's a great kind of window. This whole episode is a great window into why we started the podcast and one of our hazards in starting the podcast, because we started the podcast knowing that we could get together for like just a quick coffee and wind up still talking about stuff 4 hours later. Mm-hmm. And so I was envisioning, as you were talking, I have so much to say on that last point that you raised, but I think we're going to have to
have to be another episode?
Yes, it's going to have to be another episode. Okay. Absolutely. So for right now, there is one thing that I know we have to say in this episode. No, you're laughing at me, but it's really short. Because believe it or not, I have gotten feedback. I don't know whether you have. I've gotten feedback on our podcast that we never use our last names.
Oh, have we never said what our names are?
I think we ever said what our names are.
So we're Cher. We're like Cher.
Cher or Madonna.
And Shakira.
Yes.
Can I be Shakira?
You can be Shakira. Much better for you than for me.
My husband loves Shakira. Yeah. Okay. Well, wow. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jodi Hume.
I'm Eliot Wagenhut. And this has been...
Why? For something about that makes it feel so weird and awkward. I feel like it feels too formal now.
It does. But
you're right. But at some point, we should probably
I just figured that we ought to say our last name. Look, I'm just responding to feedback.
Fair enough. So Jodi Hume and Eliot Wagenheim
and
signing out.
So here's my story.
Bye.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is, the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is, we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.